Most gardeners drown their plants without ever realizing it, not with water, but with bad assumptions about what the soil surface should look like. We're told bare soil is good, organic mulch is always better, and stones are decorative at best and harmful at worst. That advice quietly wrecks root zones, overheats beds, and wastes water season after season. I buried stone mulch around one plant to test that advice, and the results flat out embarrassed everything I'd been taught. If you care about growing real food, not just maintaining garden vibes, subscribe to the Farm Logic channel now. This channel exists to challenge garden myths that sound good but fail in real soil, raised beds, and hydro systems. What I'm about to share saved me water, stabilized root temperatures, and pushed growth in a way compost alone never did. Why stone mulch sounds wrong but keeps solving problems organic mulch creates. Stone mulch gets dismissed because people confuse surface gravel with buried thermal mass. Dumping rocks on top of soil is lazy gardening. Burying stone deliberately at the right depth and thickness changes how heat, moisture, and oxygen move through the root zone. Organic mulch breaks down, ties up nitrogen, harbors slugs, and turns anaerobic in wet climates. I've watched straw mulch suffocate roots in raised beds during humid seasons. Stone doesn't rot, doesn't collapse, and doesn't steal nutrients. It just sits there and does its job. I buried smooth river stones and crushed gravel 6 to 8 centimeters below the soil surface, directly around the root zone of a pepper plant that had struggled for 2 seasons. The stones weren't decorative. They formed a thermal buffer. During hot days, the stones absorbed heat and slowed temperature spikes. At night, they released that heat back into the soil. Root temperature swings dropped dramatically. Instead of soil jumping from 18 degrees in the morning to 35 degrees, by afternoon, it stayed between 22 and 27 degrees. That alone explains half the growth difference I saw. This surprised me more than anything. With organic mulch, I water heavy, then watch moisture disappear unevenly. With buried stone, water infiltrated fast, spread laterally, and stayed put. The stones created micro-air gaps that prevented compaction while still breaking capillary evaporation. In practical terms, I went from watering every 2 days to every 4 or 5 days in the same bed, same plant, same sun exposure. The soil stayed damp but never swampy, even after heavy rain. I didn't dig a hole and dump rocks like a landscaper. I loosened the top 20 centimeters of soil with a broad fork, pulled soil aside in a shallow ring about 30 centimeters from the plant stem, and laid in a 3 to 5 centimeter layer of stones. The stones ranged from pea gravel to thumb-sized river rock. Sharp gravel works, but rounded stone is gentler on roots. I covered everything with the original soil, then added a thin organic layer on top, no more than 2 centimeters, to protect soil biology. The stone stayed invisible, doing the heavy lifting underneath. So why did this work even better in raised beds than in regular in-ground soil? Well, raised beds tend to exaggerate every little soil problem you might have. They dry out a lot faster, they overheat more quickly, and honestly, they can compact if you're not careful. But stone mulch actually solved all 3 of those issues for me. In a raised bed measuring about 1.2 by 2.4 meters, I placed stone beneath just one tomato plant as a sort of control comparison. That particular plant ended up with noticeably thicker stems, much darker leaves, and it even set fruit earlier than the others. Root zone probes showed higher oxygen levels under the stone compared to the compost-only side. Plus, the stone stopped the bed from collapsing into a dense, soggy sponge after repeated watering. Now, there's this pretty common fear that stones might heat up roots, but actually it's the other way around. Surface stones can heat roots, but buried stones actually stabilize them. That difference is really important. A lot of people see gravel paths get hot in the sun and just assume the same thing is happening underground, but it doesn't. Soil insulates. When stones are buried below the surface, they moderate the temperature rather than make it hotter. In hot climates, this is absolute gold. And in cooler climates, it actually helps by keeping the soil warmer at night, which extends the growing season. I've used this same approach under brassicas during the cool seasons and honestly saw faster establishment with a lot less transplant shock. So how does all this translate into hydroponic and semi-hydro systems? Well, pure hydro doesn't use soil, but root temperature is still just as important. I added stone thermal mass beneath the net pots in a Dutch bucket system, keeping the stones separate from the roots with a bit of mesh. Water temperature swings dropped by several degrees, which actually reduced root stress and cut down on algae pressure. In passive hydrobeds, the stones acted both as ballast and as temperature buffers. This isn't just about copying soil tricks into hydroponics blindly. It's really about understanding the physics and applying it where the roots actually live. So when stone mulch absolutely does not work, it's usually down to your soil conditions. If your soil drains poorly and stays saturated, stone is not going to fix that. Actually, it can make things worse. Stones don't magically drain water. They just prevent collapse and evaporation. Clay soil that hasn't been loosened or amended will still hold on to water, no matter how many rocks you pile on top. In that case, stones really need to be paired with deep aeration or some organic structure first. And just to note, shallow-rooted crops like lettuce don't benefit much from this approach. Stone mulch really shines with deep-rooted, long-season plants like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, citrus, and fruiting vines. So, here's why I stopped trusting the old always use organic mulch advice. Organic matter is, of course, essential, but it's not just about what's on the surface. When compost just sits on top, it tends to break down unevenly, attracts pests, and ends up creating these feast or famine nutrient cycles. Now, stone doesn't actually feed anything, and that's exactly why it works. It helps stabilize the environment so the biology can just get on with its job without all those extremes. I still add compost, but I make sure to bury it deeper, right where the roots and microbes can actually use it consistently. So, what really convinced me that this wasn't just a fluke? Well, I repeated the test across 3 seasons, with different crops and different beds, and honestly, it was the same pattern every single time. Faster establishment, fewer stress signs, steadier moisture, and, less intervention. The plants didn't just survive those heat waves, they actually kept growing right through them. That, to me, is the difference between gardening and farming. One reacts. The other designs systems that don't panic when conditions change. Wondering how you can try this without, committing your whole garden. Don't redo everything. Just pick one struggling plant. Install stone mulch around just that root zone. If you can, measure the soil temperature. Keep track of how often you need to water. Watch the leaf behavior during those hot afternoons. Honestly, the results won't be subtle if your garden struggles with heat or moisture swings. This isn't about decoration. It's about function. Here's why this approach really aligns with how plants evolved. Out in nature, roots often grow among stones, not in fluffy compost. Rocky soils drain well, they resist compaction, and they buffer temperature changes. We strip that out, chasing softness and aesthetics. Stone mulch quietly puts back what modern beds have been missing. If this sort of practical, experience-tested knowledge helps you grow better food with fewer inputs, do subscribe to the Farm Logic channel and, share this video with someone who's still fighting their garden instead of designing it. Better food, after all, comes from better systems, not just louder advice.